So a lot of this knowledge is like bricks, which is very easy to fall down if there's a typhoon or something. So this is what I mean by too much work on the pieces of language and not enough comprehensible, meaningful input. Now, the advantage of this kind of approach here is that you give them a test on will and going to, and they'll get 100%. They'll get 10 out of 10. But then you ask them, what's your plan tomorrow? Me go coex. Right? This is the kind of response you get. The same response you get somewhere else. Because they haven't quite got it internally. You give them a test on it, they can do it, but they can't say it. And the reason that they can't say it, primarily, is they haven't met the words in grammar enough times to feel comfortable using it. There's a certain threshold. When you meet something, a new piece of language for the first time, you can't use it immediately. Maybe some words you can, but a new piece of grammar, you can't use it immediately. You've got to get a feeling for it. Meet it a few times and learn, do we do this, and do we do that, and so on. It's not until you have enough knowledge of this, enough experience of that language form, that you're going to risk starting to use it. So what did you do? What are you doing tomorrow? Tomorrow I will coex, or I will going to coex. So you're trying, they're getting a bit better, yes? So when they've got a bit more experience beyond that, a bit more sense of how the language works, how things fit together, then they'll start to produce. It's not until they've got that massive experience of understanding how this feels, have this sort of sense of how this thing works, not just know the rule, but actually the sense of how it works, then they can start to use it. The question is, where does that sense of language come from? And it comes from lots and lots and lots of exposure. They cannot speak until they feel comfortable using their knowledge. And one of the main problems is there's not enough exposure to language. To acquire a 7,000 word vocabulary requires them to meet about 10 to 15 million words. That's the mathematics behind this. And the reason, I'll explain the mathematics. If you take a large amount of text, the most frequent word in English is the. Now you read 17 words and then you see the. Read another 17 words and then you meet the. Another 17 words you meet the. Statistically. Not in every sentence, but statistically. The second most frequent word is the be verb. Yes? Be, are, am, is. So if you read 20 words, you're going to meet the and the be verb. Another 20 words, you're going to meet the and the be verb. Now, if we extend that to the first 1,000 most frequent words in English, you have to read about 8,000 words before you meet all of them once, at least once. Okay? That's how frequent they come. If you want to meet, say, the 6,000th most frequent word in English, you have to meet somewhere around 120 to 150,000 words just to meet that 6,000th word one time. Okay? But of course, we don't learn words by meeting them one time. We have to meet them again and again and again. But if you're meeting that 6,000th word and 120,000 words to meet it, you have to wait another 120,000 words before it's going to come again. And another 120,000 words before it's going to come again. And if we know that for vocabulary learning it takes, say, 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 meetings of a word just to pick up its meaning and hold the meaning in your head, that's 20 times 120,000. You do the math. Okay? That's the mathematics of vocabulary. Some words appear more frequently than other ones. A typical Korean high school textbook series, 3-level course, has about 225,000 words. Not even close to this. Okay? If you add all of the Compass graded readers, Cambridge graded readers, Cengage graded readers, Penguin graded readers, you add them all up together, about 1,000 books, you're only up to about 4 million words. So what we can see here is that there's still a long way to go. There's simply not enough input for students to meet language enough times to get used to it. Here we go. So what does a typical reading text look like for most Korean students? It looks like a Compass book. Yes, like this. This is a very typical, very normal textbook. It's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with this book. It's actually quite a good book. But this is the kind of reading that the students will meet. So typically what happens here is that, you can't see, but it's got a short text. The text is short. Okay? Maybe 200, 300, 400 words. This is what they meet. I don't know why, but these things they were black. But anyway, you can't see them. Anyway, it does say many difficult words. Yes? There's some difficult words. So this word here is surgery, this is physical, and so on. Yes? And these words are there to be taught. The idea is to teach these words, and that's cool. That's what you want to do. That's the reason we're doing it, to teach the words. That's cool. The next thing is we have some exercises, reading comprehension exercises, vocabulary exercises, working on this. And down here, possibly we'll have some definitions. Now here they're in English, they may be in Korean, Japanese, French, Chinese, or whatever. And this is a typical reading text. It doesn't look just like yours, but I think most reading texts that students meet look something like this. Okay? So how are they typically taught to read? From textbooks with short, difficult texts, doing lots of exercises to practice the grammar, vocabulary, reading strategies and skills. They all read the same material that was chosen by the teacher, or by the school, or by the school district. Oh, hang on, I'm going too fast. They all read at the same pace. I don't mean the same reading speed. I mean, all the students move to Unit 2 at exactly the same time. Yes? So if you're a fast reader, you sort of sit there going to sleep. If you're a slow reader, I haven't finished before we've moved on. Okay? They'll read at the same difficulty level because they all have the same book. Right? It doesn't matter whether you're a high-level student or a low-level student, everybody's doing the same stuff. And there's a good reason to, because we're trying to teach everybody something. But in any class, if you've got 30 students, there's going to be 10 or 15% who already find what you're doing easy. And 10 or 15% will never understand if you explain it for a million years. Yes? So you're trying to meet that sweet spot. But you've lost 10 or 15%, and you've lost 10 or 15% immediately, simply because of this type of approach. Okay? Now, it's a good thing to do, because you try and hit as many students as you possibly can. That's a good thing to do. There's nothing wrong with this. But we have to understand that we're not hitting everybody. Okay? So the text may or may not interest the students. Yes, maybe interesting, maybe not. And it's hard to develop fluent eye movements for speed reading if you are constantly slowed down. So your eye is reading like this, and then stop, and reading, stop, stop. So it's hard for you to, a bit like driving. You're driving along the road, they've got the bumps in the road, yes? You can't drive quickly. And this is the same thing here. So we call this intensive reading. There are a few chances for the teaching of discrete language points. I beg your pardon. It's good for teaching of discrete language points, yes? You can teach vocabulary, you can teach some grammar. It's a good thing to do. But there's few chances for the development of fluent eye movements, few chances to learn the patterns of the language, that is the grammatical systems, the collocations, the colligations, how things fit together. Why? Because they don't meet them very often. There's little allowance for the student interest, little allowance for reading at their own ability level, and often it's quite difficult for students to add new language to the existing store of language because the material is too difficult. A Krashnan would say I+1, I+2, I+3, quite a bit higher than where they are. So there are some great benefits for this type of reading. Please continue to do this. But we need to add another form of reading to that as well. This is just an example here of typical Korean reading texts. They tend to teach the first 1,000 most frequent words in English quite well. They're pretty good at that. Yes? The second 1,000 most frequent word, unfortunately what happens is there tends to be quite a big change to a lot of low frequency, not so much useful vocabulary, and also many of the 2,000 most frequent words in English aren't met. And in a later presentation, another conference, I'm going to give you some actual data on that. This is the comparison between Japanese high school and Korean high school. This is what you get. Right? That's what you get for Japan, and that's what you get for Korea. Yes? Who do you think is going to do better in English? Typically, Koreans are outperforming Japanese. And you ask me why, and I say, that's the reason why. Yes? So why build reading speed? Well, first of all, natives read at 250 to 300 words a minute. Okay? Non-natives often read at less than 100. It's very hard to build up a sense of language and high-level comprehension. Because students are often reading at the literal level. This is something I'm going to be talking about a bit later. If they can read faster, they'll be able to read more naturally, process the language more effectively and efficiently. They'll be able to understand more. They'll be able to remember more. Yes? They remember more because they're moving to a higher level of processing. Yes? They're now dealing with they don't have to think about the literal level of what's this word, what's this word, what's this word. They can move to a higher level of processing where they think in ideas and think in big pieces of language. And they can read more text. As we saw, reading more text, actually meeting more language, is a key element for the development of language. And they'll be able to finish tests faster. One of the reasons that students aren't particularly good at tests is they simply cannot finish them. They're not fast enough, so they have to guess the last points, particularly on TOEFL and TOEIC tests. The tests are long. They have to guess the last 15 questions because they simply can't get enough speed up to actually finish the test. So, how well does the course present the language the students need? Research suggests an average language course doesn't systematically recycle grammar forms outside the presentation unit and lesson. So what happens, I'll explain this in detail in a moment. There's an almost random vocabulary selection strategy, yes, without much regard to frequency or usefulness. And rarely, if ever, do books recycle words taught in Unit 1, rarely do those words taught appear again in Unit 3 or Unit 5. And they provide minimal additional practice in review units or workbooks, typically. Okay? So there's an overwhelming focus on new material. And let's look at that a bit more carefully.